Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy Friday. We are live on YouTube here at Garybpilot. Thanks for tuning in. As you might have realized from the title of today's article, we are focusing in on the new report from the Wall Street Journal that allegedly shifts the focus and attention to the captain and what happened on that sad day. So we're going to get into that. I got another PowerPoint presentation. I want a quick update on the Captain Steve interview. We filmed on Monday and the episode got scrapped, I guess, for technicality reasons and the fact that this new information came out. So we are refilming a new episode on Monday. So that's the update. Thanks again for everybody that gave the nice compliments to Shay. Hello again, Shay. Thanks for being here. Most of you guys are pretty nice. So we had quite a few had the same joke. You guys need more original content. Keep asking, hey, Gary, your wife's cute. Is she single? Like they need, I think you need a better joke than that. And then shout out to all the creeps that found your Instagram somehow and still request and unrequest, but whatever. We're getting off track. You know what? Why does it work that way? You remember in London, those two guys came up to us and the guys say, hey, they like say hi for a second. And then they're like, oh, are you guys open? I'm like, no, we're not open. And if
Yeah.
we were, it wouldn't be for you. But anyways, we got Shay a microphone. So we're going to answer your questions here and she's going to be able to read questions that you guys can hear. So again, if your question's not getting answered, it might have already been answered. So that's what we're doing. And then, by the way, we're doing a new video tomorrow. The 5 most dangerous airlines in the world created, or the list is created by me. So we're going to go ahead and launch that tomorrow. So I'd love any support on that. All right, let's get into the topics. All right, so this is obviously the information that came out from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I am still of the belief that we have to keep an open mind here. And I'll be honest by saying that I'm naturally a little bit of a contrarian. I don't tend to just believe the mainstream narrative, and I think that's not everybody needs to do it, but I think a lot of people, at least some people, need to be very like aware and not just accept the fact. Because a lot of times what we see with the media is they'll paint a narrative, and then by the time the actual facts come out, it doesn't matter because the public kind of already forgot about it and it went on its way. So I am just preface this by saying because all we have is the original, the preliminary report, and now we'll go into this. So the Wall Street Journal here is saying that according to people, right here, you can see it's highlighted, familiar with US officials' early assessment of the evidence uncovered in the crash. What they're saying is that it was the captain who turned off the switch. And they're trying to say basically that it looks like it was deliberate. And the first officer basically expressed surprise and then he panicked. And they claim to say, well, the captain remained calm. Now, of course, right, the Wall Street Journal is a legitimate news source. We're going to look into that. We're going to keep an eye on things. But let's not forget, it says there's no official source. It just says, according to US officials, like, we don't have a named source on this. So this is why I am still out there with the theory that we need to keep the options on the table until things are absolutely off the table. Having said that, when you look at this information, we are starting to paint a little bit of a picture of maybe this was more intentional, possibly a German wings incident, because it's not only that. So if we go over to the next slide here, okay, this was from the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail said that so they actually named a source, and they said that Captain Mohan, he said he's a leading aviation safety expert in India, has revealed that several Air India pilots have allegedly confirmed that this pilot had experienced and suffered from poor mental health. Now, here's the thing about being on YouTube, and which is crazy. Which, by the way, thanks again. I can't believe my past 2 live streams did over 300,000 views. Like it is blowing my mind that this many people would tune in and watch this. So, and a lot of people ask why live. I get it; it's maybe a little less polished, but at least I can sit here and read your, answer questions for you and like interact a little bit more. But that being said, having 300,000 views on a live stream, I get a lot of emails, and the emails I had been getting, I had several emails come in of people saying, "Hey, I knew the captain, or I have a friend that knew the captain, and this guy had all kinds of mental health problems." And obviously, I didn't say anything about that because A, how am I going to confirm it? Even if they show me some proof that what they're saying is true, that they knew the captain, like how do I go about making to make sure that that's a valid claim? Even like you can send me screenshots. Okay, well, how do I know that's not doctored? If it says the name, anybody could make up a text. You see what I'm saying? So I try and keep very like a tight perimeter on anything that I'll allow in. But this is now apparently with a named source claiming that he had taken time off from flying in the last 3 to 4 years. And I guess he had taken a medical leave for his mental health. So let's not forget too, just because this is potentially, let's just say, again, we don't have this confirmed, but let's say it is potentially true. This does not necessarily mean that this was done intentionally. The other options that are in the preliminary report are still on the table. Now, again, as you start to stack things in categories, I did on one of the last live streams, I did a pros con and a con column. Like I had both columns of like there. This obviously would start leaning towards, okay, again, things that I don't want to say. And this is just where it's starting to guide us. I'm going to keep it all on the table for now. But these are things to keep into consideration. And I don't want, one of the emails I got, somebody said, mental health is incurable. And that's like, you know what? Well, I absolutely disagree with that. I think that would be like saying you break your leg and that's incurable. Like, I don't agree with that statement. But, going on that, and again, this is going to be a shorter live stream just because we're talking a little bit about this. It's just a little Friday pick me up before my video drops tomorrow. But let's go back to full screen here. So going on the pilot mental health, I just want to address this a little bit. I'm sure Captain Steve and I are going to talk about this on our podcast on Monday. But, you know, I said this, I got interviewed for an article the other day. And one of the things I said is the FAA is in a tough spot, right? The FAA needs to make rules because obviously they don't want people that are mentally unfit in the cockpit and something dangerous happens, right? Having said that, the current system is so broad and so punishing if the wrong things are said that it can drive people underground. It can drive people to not actually get help or to actually, it's very like punishing for your own career to even have a moment of like weakness. And just to give you an example, I was going to play that clip. I wish we would have had it from Bill Burr, but Bill Burr has this funny clip when he's talking about, he's like, you ever be driving there one day and then all of a sudden you look up, you see 30 people on the curb and you just think, and the point of the joke is that everybody has crazy thoughts. But let's say let's say your spouse died, right? And you go to therapy and you talk about some of these crazy thoughts you had and you're just talking. And suddenly those thoughts gets translated down as like a serious threat. And all of a sudden, boom, you lose your medical. And most people don't know that. And you don't actually lose your licenses when it comes to this kind of thing. It's your medical. And without your medical, you're done. You don't fly. And not only that, I've heard cases of people getting their mental health, like when they're getting at like a therapist or a psychiatrist or something, and something gets mistranslated, right? They said, I never said that, but that's the way it got written down. And now the FAA looks at it and says, hey, you're never getting back in a plane again. So I think there's a change coming. And again, I think this is a good place to talk about it, not because I'm saying that this is what happened, but it kind of ties in to a topic that already needs to be talked about anyways. And, it's just kind of my personal opinion that the things need to change. And again, I'm still leaving everything on the table. I'm at the point at this day and age where I still am going to wait till we have all this data to say absolutely one way or the other. And I see a lot of people locking in now. I'm seeing the divide happen. A lot of people are saying this is 100% the pilot and he did it. And then there's other people going the other direction saying it's a cover up for Boeing and all that. All I can promise you is that if there's any evidence or data that I look at, it gets right in front of me. I promise you the truth that I'm going to cover it as I see it. And I'm not going to cover for one person or the other. It's like, what do they say? The price is my life. There's no price you're going to buy me off. I'm going to tell you as I see it. I might not always be right, but it's going to at least be my honest point of view. So that was kind of the gist of my live stream today. I think we'll just get to questions. I didn't really want to have it that long. Shay, how are we doing over here?
We're doing good. I have a couple questions I could ask you.
Okay. Ask if there's any other topic they want me to talk about, but if not, in the meantime, let's get to the questions.
All right, let's see. I'm going to work my way back up here again.
Okay.
Someone asked, do you think the AAIB tampered with the information?
The who tampered with it?
The AAIB.
Uh, you know, that's a thing. I hate to even think that. I've been talking to a lot of pilots that know people in India that know that thing. Nobody seems to be that sure. I would really hope not. I think personally, no, because I think of how many people you'd have to cover this up to tamper with the data. But then again, I've heard stories that I can't confirm yet that people are getting excluded from this end of investigation that normally would have been in there. Like normally in an investigation, it's my opinion, you should have some third party with no like dog in the fight where you could just verify that things are being done correctly, right? And I have heard that they're being very secretive, but it may be for other reasons. Just because they're being secretive or different doesn't necessarily mean, it's a cover up. Next one.
Someone said, let's see, what I want to know is why did the ANA flight get both engines cut off closer to landing?
And that's a great point. Another great point, because that's another reason why I'm leaving everything on the table. This is what I was talking about. The media and the narrative, and powerful people can shift narratives and away from things. And then by the time as I said earlier, that by the time the story is like gone and people forget about it, then, oh, by the way, well, there was this little technicality problem. For people that don't know what he's referring to, in 2019, there was an ANA flight, Boeing 787, that touched down, and upon landing, both engines, boom, shut down. To me, that is a very big, like, what? Again, it's just like talking about the pilots, having, let's say he did have some depression or mental health that he was dealing with. That doesn't automatically mean that he did this intentionally or at all, right? And the same thing goes here. Just because this happened once doesn't mean it happened here. The fact that this happened before on a transition from air to ground, right as they're landing, it means you need to keep your options open and keep everything on the table, because it absolutely is a factor here. At least it's a factor worth considering. I don't think we just throw that away, because I am still of the mindset that it's unbelievable to me that a plane's two engines could shut down. If you didn't know, they shut down, they couldn't even get the engines restarted. They had to be taxied into the gate. And let's say this happened here. This one's taking off, this one's landing. Well, obviously, the landing, you're not going to hear about that because it's already on the ground. It's no problem. Taking off is a different story. How about the next question?
Why do you think the landing gear wasn't lifted?
So there's two reasons for that. The landing gear. What I don't understand is, as far as, and Mentor Pilot did a good video on this when he talks about, and I did this in one of my first videos where I explained this, is when they lifted the landing gear lever. Remember, the gear has a tilt and it tilted forward. As far as we can tell in the video, the wheels tilted forward. That is an indication that the gear went up. The bigger question is, why didn't the gear bay doors open up when that happened? That is a little bit more confusing, but I think obviously if you lose two engines, you're going to lose the hydraulics. The rat is not going to produce enough hydraulic power to put that gear up, even if the switch is in the up position. And my thought is the gear went up because, when you rotate, you go like this, you go V1, rotate, and you go positive rate, gear up. So even if the gear went up for a second, my thought is maybe it's the FO flying. If the FO is flying and all of a sudden you're going back down, I'm going to lower that gear unless I'm like over water. So my thought is the gear went up, some parts of it worked, it didn't go up, and then he lowered the gear back down because, like, well, it's better than having the gear up.
Okay, this one says, while we wait for the actual reason, can we talk about the ELT that didn't work after the crash as confirmed in the preliminary report?
I haven't read that part and haven't focused on that much. I mean, an ELT is basically just an electronical signal that rattles when, if you get in a crash, it sends off like a. I don't know how relevant that is. If it didn't go off and maybe it's faulty, or it just got, an ELT is meant as like a signal, as like a beacon if you like ditch or you crash. But I mean, the fact that that plane probably mostly got destroyed is not surprising me. I don't think ELTs are built like the black boxes to survive that kind of impact. So that's my opinion on that. But again, I didn't read that much about the ELT.
This one says, if the highest recorded speed is 180 knots, when would have the engines failed given inertia will still accelerate the aircraft after engine loss?
If the max speed was 180, I would say it was probably right about there, like not much longer, because you're going to continue. The second the fuel cutoff switches go off, you're going to slowly start losing it. But I would say it probably was to the moment those switches got turned off the second before. That would just be my guess. But again, I don't know. If you started pitching the nose down real quick for whatever reason, like, you could accelerate quicker. So, it's just my opinion that right when you cut those, as the probably was your fastest speed.
Let's see. This one says, what are your thoughts about a directed energy weapon being the cause? It would immediately disable and freeze all electronics on the plane.
Yeah, that's a little I don't want to say Alex Jones out there for me, but not that I'm talking trash about anybody, but the direct energy weapons, I don't know enough about. I will say this, and this is just between you and me, YouTube viewers. After COVID, I will like entertain any theory, or at least hear you out, right? So I don't. I would say probably not. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially when I don't think a direct energy weapon is going to turn off your fuel control switches. But That being said, I don't know, but I highly doubt it, is my personal opinion.
Okay, let's see. I don't want to ask that question. Um, okay, because this incident happened during rotation, which was 3 seconds after leaving the ground and 4 seconds before the gear is called up, could something have slid off the panel under the switch caps?
Yeah, I don't know. Stig, if you go to Stig Aviation's YouTube channel, he just did another one on the fuel cutoff switches. I really don't think anything slides. Read the last part again for me.
Let me see. Could something have slid off the panel and under the switch caps?
I really don't think so. And again, but this is one of those things we were talking about. It's the bulletin mentions that, that maybe if the locking mechanism is disengaged, I don't fully understand that enough, but I really highly doubt it. I would say it had to be accidental, like we're talking about Delta in 1986, where the guy meant to put the EEC switches and then he accidentally chopped the fuel control switches instead. Or there was some type of electrical malfunction. And on that point, I should mention one of the things that's a good point that somebody from I can't talk today, a data analytics company sent me this full AI report with all available information. And they pointed out that is what we need to know is the fuel control switches when is registered on the FDR, the flight data recorder. Is that from the switch actually moving, or is that just the signal that's being sent? And that's an answer I hopefully will find out. Any other ones?
Um, this might have been a question we already covered in our last video, but it's one that keeps coming up in this one.
Okay.
If the pilots would have restarted the engines about 3 to 5 seconds after cutoff instead of the 10 seconds they were delayed, would the airplane be able to still climb again and not crash?
I believe yes. I believe, especially since the other one of the engines, I think it was engine one, relit like almost right away. That 100% had it been a quicker reaction, then I think there's a much higher chance because it's the second those are in cutoff. The second if the airplane is in flight and those go to from the cutoff to run, everything takes over. That thing says, "Get this engine on right now," and it's all automatic. It starts giving fuel. It fires up the whole everything. So but that's not to blame on the pilot. Let's say this was an intentional cutoff and it took him 10 seconds. Remember, this guy's flying, just got put in a situation that nobody's ever trained for, never prepared for. 10 seconds is actually like quick for a shock factor. What I said before is I didn't understand if he turned one on, how did we wait to get to 4 seconds for the next one? But again, maybe he thought it was only one engine and went over. You can't judge somebody in that situation. Nobody, it's a terrible spot to be in, assuming that's exactly what happened.
I just had a question and now I lost it.
Okay.
The screen refreshed. Let's see.
We'll
If you
answer.
guys have any more questions, now's your time to comment. This one says, why does this not happen in an Airbus?
Well, it's just because this hasn't really happened everywhere. Remember that's happened one time with a Delta flight, but they turned them on quick enough when they realized their mistake. So in Airbus, it's nothing is going to stop. Airbus has the same logic as Boeing. I think it's only the Embraer that doesn't allow the fuel control switch to come off when the power is at full power. So the Airbus and the Boeing are the same logic. So assuming that that the switches were the ones that were actually moved, whether deliberately or accidentally, the Airbus would do the exact same thing.
Okay, is there any safety feature in the aircraft that cuts off the engine fuel automatically to cause that system malfunction?
And that's one thing I looked at. I couldn't find any data on that. I seem to think that like there's an automatic like fuel cutoff switch, but from my understanding is there's no spring loaded. And again, I just was exploring a theory. I never said this is what happened. I said this is an interesting comment. Let's talk about it. According to Stig and the other people I've talked to, that's not an actual thing. The only thing is that's a manual pull, of the fire handle to actually, either to cut off the fuel or if you blow the fire bottles, that's going to cut everything off to the engine.
This one says, I can't stand when it refreshes.
Oh yeah, so many comments.
Someone basically asked if you guys train for situations where another pilot takes over controls with malicious intent.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad question, but the only reason I'm chuckling is because no, we don't. That's not. I mean, how do you prepare for that? You go in to train because you train to trust, you train to rely, you train to cooperate. How would you train for something intentionally? That kind of stuff has to be dealt with by the FAA, the medical examiners, the company. There's got to be other screenings like that. There's no way that you're going to be able to kind of to prep for something like that. As I said before, though, in one of the other live streams, this may be worth considering the logic on like, hey, do you really need to have the fuel control switches be able to run from run to cut off both, like right at like takeoff? Like maybe we could just disable those like between takeoff and 1,000 feet. I don't know. Maybe an engineer is going to step in and say, what if they're both on fire? You need to cut them off. And now you can't cut off fuel the engine because it's disabled. Like, I don't know. Maybe if we need like a thing like the nuclear codes, where you both have keys from 30 feet away and you turn them at the same, I don't know. I'm just making things up. Next.
Well, we talked about how long it takes for the rat to deploy, but how long does it take after it deploys to supply power?
It's not long. I think the rat will come out almost instantaneously, but to fire up and start turning, I mean, I think it's like a couple of seconds. It's not long.
But this one's a good one. Have you ever actually flown a plane?
Never, and that's is he asking me the flat earther? Because for those of you unaware with my prior work, it's like I just basically spent like a year like debunking flat earthers, and they weren't very happy with me. But I kind of moved on. I literally felt my IQ lowering, and I just yeah couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, no, never been in a plane ever.
Um, I mean, we're still getting a lot of questions of people asking how long it takes for the rat to deploy.
Yeah, I
So
already answered
we
those.
answered that up ahead. Why does the India media outlet say there's no evidence that the fuel switches were turned off? There's also no evidence that they turned it on either.
Yeah, I see. I don't know. I haven't been reading the India media too much, so I haven't seen that. But I guess I would have to look into that to give it a fair answer.
That was in an article too, that it mentioned that they were saying that there was no evidence that it was actually turned off and to not feed into the speculation of what was said.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's like, that happens here. You get a story that ends up being wrong later on down the line, so it's not like everybody gets it perfect. So, there could be a lot of other factors at play, and that's why, again, I think it's important to like let's look at what we have so far, and even when you look at these sources, like, I don't want to say take it with a grain of salt, but we're gonna, again, especially when you don't name a source, like I'm just gonna be much more cautious to just go, yeah, that definitely happened, like because that first one from the Wall Street Journal, their sources, trust me, bro.
Let's see. Getting a lot of repeating questions, a lot of comments.
Okay. Well, maybe if the
I mean, some of the questions, we don't have answers to, like why did the pilot do it? Why was it deliberate? What were his intentions? If it
yeah,
was a suicide, why did he do it at that point? Like those are just questions that
yeah,
we
that's
can't
just
answer.
yeah, you can't answer because you don't know. We A don't know that that's the fact, and B it's like, that's stuff where the guy is now his entire hard drive, his text, his calls, his whole everything he's ever done, he's going to get interviewed by all the people he knows. So
Does the FDR data ever get released to the public, like the full raw data?
I believe so. They obviously have to transcribe it and put it into format, but I think so. You usually for sure get the full cockpit voice recorder. So you usually have that entire thing. So that was kind of the thing with the prelim report is they left so much out. We don't actually know like why were you leaving stuff out? Is it just because like okay, it's just too early, or it's because we're purposely trying to like smooth things over and like not freak anybody out? Like, those are questions we'll find out later on down the road.
Why did they use the entire runway when they didn't need to?
I don't think they did use the entire runway, but then again, remember if I'd have to look and see the actual data because if you look at the takeoff in the prelim report, it looks like they're still over the runway. I think what happened was there was dust on the runway and or kind of on the side, and as they rotated off, it looked like it looked like they overran the runway. But as far as I know, they didn't actually overrun the runway. It was like some initial like misleading data.
Did the CVR indicate about the positive rate or gear up call?
Well, so the CVR is oh yeah, so that's the cockpit voice recorder. That's only going to listen to what was said. If that's what they're referring to, they didn't really say. They kind of put the data together, but they didn't actually. They left a lot of things out, especially they didn't say when the pilot asked, "Hey, when did you cut this off?" So it until you have all that in a perfect formation, we're gonna like we don't know.
Let's see.
We're already doing 24 minutes. I think we're pretty good. Is there
We
any
are.
other good ones?
Just a lot of repeaters, a lot
Okay.
of questions, as I said, that we don't have answers to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you've got a question, better ask it right now because I'm about to sign off. But guys, I really appreciate you tuning in the live stream. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for all the support. New video drops tomorrow. I'd love if you check it out. And by the way, I asked you guys if I should take a sponsor. 87% yet said yes. So trigger alert, my first sponsor is tomorrow in my video, but and Big Mac is back. So hopefully, that's good. Any other good questions or is that it?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, guys. Well, I appreciate you watching. Shay, thanks for joining.
Thanks for
She's
having
not going to
me.
approve your Instagram request. And until next time.
Unfortunately not.
So